Alrighty, and welcome to our next instructional video. I'm Bighead, this is Farix. Today we're going to be doing like combo attacks. So just kind of a video gamey term for what in LARPing would be attacking and then attacking after that, as opposed to attacking and then returning to guard. So I've seen a few questions about this online, I've seen a few comments about this online. This is kind of a broad topic that we're going to be jumping into, and just like what I've talked about before with faking, there's going to be a bunch of different ways of doing it, so I'm going to go through a handful of sort of my favorites and going into kind of the concepts involved instead of exhaustively being like, here's all of the combo shots you can throw, because that does nobody any good. To start off, really the concept of the combo shot, we're going to be covering, I guess, how to do a combo shot effectively, and then when to effectively do a combo shot are going to be the two important points. And for that, there's going to be a number of different ways that you can accomplish making good use out of a combo, but all of it stems from putting your opponent in a position where they can't attack you after your initial attack. So the most basic one of these would probably be just taking your opponent's right arm, your opponent's sword arm. So if I'm fighting Farix and I cross over and hit that arm there, it makes sense for me to, instead of pulling back while he switches and then we keep on fighting, to simply go into the next shot, because I don't have any reason to pull back into guard. So if I go here into here, that would just be what we call a double tap, right? I mean, you're just throwing the same location twice, it's real easy. For me, because of the way that weights shift throughout the course of a fight, my preference, since most Amtgardians are very paranoid about that follow-up right-hand shot, they will get that arm out of the way pretty quickly, is instead of throwing the second shot for that arm, I'll throw a second shot for the lead leg. So this is just a really, really basic one that I'm going to throw on a ditch line very, very regularly, is to come up and using some, tactical advantage that I've created, hit my opponent in the arm and then hit them in the leg as they're trying to recover from losing their sword arm. Now, the nice thing about this is it works against sword and board very well. It works against a lot of things very well. I mean, that's a significant portion of why that's muscle memory, is if my opponent has a shield and I hit that sword arm, then they are going to relatively easily get a block over there if I go for that secondary attack for the same spot. But with any shieldment, if I get that first shot, odds are really, really low that they're going to be blocking that leg on the second shot. So that's a relatively basic one on how to deny your opponent the opportunity to respond, is just take away what they can respond with. If they have one sword, make it so they can't swing that sword at you, and swing away, Merle. But there are other ways of doing it, and this kind of goes into one of the big concepts that I have with like single short sword fighting, is if I don't have to use my equipment to defend myself, then I can use my equipment to attack with. So if my opponent is over here, he has a sword and a shield, and I were to throw an attack out this way and then step hard away from that shoulder, if my opponent attacks out of that position, I have gotten myself out of range. Even if he were to swing in a flat arc, because I've stepped away from the shoulder, I've cleared that range and can no longer be hit. So since I no longer have to block with my sword to stay alive, I now can throw multiple attacks with my sword. There's no reason for me to return to guard. So if I come in and I were to throw a shot to bait out an attack, and then sidestep away from that attack, regardless of the angle I'm out of range here, then it allows me to throw shots from multiple areas. It doesn't even have to be a sword arm, because I don't have to return to guard unless he adjusts his feet in such a way that he can now start hitting me. So that is absolutely one of my favorite ways of doing combo shots. Other things are when an opponent is closing with me, trying to combo instead of taking that leg first, or instead of taking that arm first, spoiler alert, if an opponent's stepping in towards me, you can take the leg and then go into the arm, and if you take the leg before they come into range and they don't swing out of that, you don't have to return back to guard. So that's going to be somewhat situational because some opponents, you take the leg and they swing. So you have to be paying attention to your opponent, but if their response to losing that leg isn't to immediately swing, you can throw a second attack off of there immediately and go out. So those are all sort of the more basic ways that I do it. Ben has somewhat different, Farix has somewhat different methodology about it. Do you want to go through like some of how you set up a combo shot so that your opponent doesn't have the opportunity to attack you?
Yeah. So I guess jumping back to your first point, just for my train of logic here, like on the double tap and on combos similar to that, a lot of times it can pay to throw a shallow shot. So like I might hit him in the wrist, he might move his arm, and he'll block it. Can you switch hands real quick just to, okay. So like, throw it real shallow. So like the most I'm gonna hit is in the middle of the forearm. But if he moves his arm, he's committing to that block. So if I take a step in between my 1-2, now his hand is going right at the base of my foam, ideally, and then I'm pushing down, creating an angle out of that. So if you throw on someone and they do register that block, that's a very easy double tap is here, and then when they commit to, even if they go to swing out of that, if they're coming straight, I'm blocking and I'm throwing that shot. So I'm basically forcing my way into that lane as a double tap.
Yeah, so the first one isn't intended to land specifically, but you're getting.
But I mean, you might get lucky. You know, they might not register as fast, or you might be a little more in range than you think you are, or something like that. But yeah, it's just a light tap to the hand, see what they do. They don't move, throw it a little harder, you'll hit them. If they do move to block, here, take that step in. They have to either bring their arm back, or if they go to throw, they're going to move your arm. They're going to move their arm into your arm. And then when the light's not in the way, you can hit it.
It is raining outside, by the way, so we have decided this is our place.
Yeah, and then let's see, moving back into range and blocking. So a lot of the combos I like to throw have a what I would refer to as like a timing stutter in the middle. So instead of attack, it'll be like attack, pause, attack. And an example of this would be something I've been really working on lately. Yeah, that's fine. Is I will come in and I will throw a stab with no intention of hitting them, just leave it right there. I will force them to make a decision, and then when they make that decision, you adapt to what that decision is. So by moving his arm across his body, which is probably the most correct response here, you can come out into the arm, or I can take an offside step and throw the stab anyway. And since he's already registered that he's blocked it, the chance that he will block it again is very low. So it's very much, it's like this, get him to react, and then just take that little stab, or just keep, your arm in front of your body when you do, just in case. But it's very much, you're gonna throw the first one, wait to see what their response is, and then do the second one.
So in real fast, the whole keep your arm in front also allows for combo shots.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to return to guard because you have something else defending you. Now, the most famous of which would be a shield. If you have a shield, combo shots can often be very effective because if you have a guard in place that does not rely on the sword, you do not have to bring your sword back to home to defend yourself in certain circumstances. So if Farix were to be getting ready to attack me and I were to throw out to trace a shot, and he blocks across and swings on me, he does not necessarily have to return his shot to home to do follow-up attacks. Because he stayed, just cover with a shield as though I'm tracing. So this allows him to throw attacks out without really having to worry about bringing the sword back to home. Now the big caveat to that is the further you spend, the more time you spend past your shield, against an opponent with your sword on past your shield, the more likely you are to not have a sword and shield in separate hands. So there really is no here's the perfect time to do this. You'll always win within LARP fighting. There's always going to be an assumption of risk and a little bit of give and take there. So much of this is I'm hoping to be able to plant concepts for people that don't necessarily know what to do with it. And then you're going to have to gain some experience to know exactly how that applies to you. But yeah, I mean, those are several different ways of how to when to throw a combo shot is when you can't be returned on effectively in such a way you're going to be required to block with your sword, so it allows you to continue swinging out from there. You know, for a couple of other ones, I mean, because people specifically talk about the double tap, I guess I will go over that in a little bit more depth. So there are multiple ways of doing it, but really the double tap traditionally is going to be 2 shots to the same arm. So some of the most common ones and some of the safest ones are just boom, right? So I tend to throw it with 2 different motions because it allows me to throw it faster. So if I push out with this motion and twist with this motion, I can get 2 very, very quick attacks on my opponent, and if the first one hits, the second one should hit, and I'll go from there.
On that one specifically, at least when I see you throw it, your hand kind of drifts over this way, just the slightest bit before you come back over this way. So I think that that's just an important note to make. Is like you can put a lot of, like I'm moving this way and then throw the shot the opposite way, and that will actually increase your chance of double taps, even though it takes a little bit longer to finish that shot, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, so having the proper setup to be able to land the second angle is going to be more important than the speed of the first shot.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So if you catch them more out of position, you buy yourself more time, even if it's not mechanically, like body mechanically faster. Because if I catch Tim out of position, like I said, with this stab, and like I said, it just takes an extra step and a stab, and he's very committed to blocking that shot and pushing me offline. It's the same kind of concept.
Yeah. So yeah, and going back into it, so we do have the sorry, we're a little scattered. It's okay. So you know, the double shot to the sword arm is very common. One thing that you will see a lot of times, particularly in single short sword tournaments, though, will be double tapping the offhand. Now this one absolutely has its inherent risks, but if my opponent comes in and commits really heavily to like a hip scoop, Ben knew what was going on. And I can catch the block over here, it's relatively easy for me to just hammer on that arm twice because my opponent has committed to a shot that really mechanically he can't double tap through. It's very, very difficult to, from here, throw that second tap with any sort of you know, good feelings in your shoulder. Whereas I can very mechanically just throw a couple of presses in, a couple of chops in, and win that fight. So if my opponent is going to commit heavily to a shot in single short sword, even if I can't get to the sword arm, I can win that fight very quickly just by throwing a double tap out there. You will see actually a relatively high number of simuls in single short sword where both people go in, go offside, and then throw double taps, and then we all just sit there and we go, okay, so we're both dead, and you reset. Now, you know, sort of the counterplay to that is if my opponent appears to be going for that, is to throw over for sword side, and instead of double tapping his offside, even though it's an easier shot to achieve, it's a more consistent shot, is I can time him out by taking his sword arm when he takes my off arm, and we both throw double taps, generally speaking, because you always finish the combo, I'm aware. So as my opponent is finishing his combo and I'm finishing mine, then it's a very quick and easy call to say, hey, so your first shot was in time, my first shot was in time, but I still had an arm to throw a second shot, and you did not still have an arm to throw a second shot, so that's the win to me. You know, and this is all going off of the fact that consistently landing a torso shot is difficult if your opponent is good. So a lot of times it's much easier to tap at the targets that are presented to you than to really sell heavily into like a hip scoop or a slot shot, something that your opponent can hand block out of or block and counter out of. It's just, to me, it's safer in all sorts of different situations just to hit the limb twice than to try to go for a torso shot. Going through, there is one shot that I really want to talk about because it's one of my favorites. It's one that I've taught a fair amount of people. Feel free to grab your strap shield, actually. So this is one that is honestly one of my favorite combo shots to demonstrate, and I can do it with Florentine, I can do it with Sword and Board. It works single sword just fine, and it works like a charm with down spear. But for this, I'm going to demonstrate with single sword actually. So all the setup that's required for this is for my opponent to commit heavily to an attack, a chop or a wrap in my upper left quadrant, right? So with single sword, I'm going to be setting up baits over here to try to get my opponent to attack. With down spear, it's very easy because people a lot of times like taking that down spear arm. People think that if they take that they gain all the advantages, and they really a lot of times set themselves up for failure because it's almost always bait. And so what I'm doing here though is really going through two motions, and this is so we're just going to walk all the way through what to me is like a quintessential combo shot. So if my opponent commits heavily to an attack, it is not simply throwing like a probing attack, but commits heavily to it. I'm trying not to cover too much of the shield because that'll make this a real short exercise. So if he were to throw a chop or a wrap over to this side, what this allows me to do is to bring whatever's in my left arm or my left arm itself up to block this shot, right? And as I'm doing that, I'm going to take a step forward and I'm going to chop at this forearm, right? So the first motion I'm doing is just taking a step forward and chopping down. Okay, if I'm single sword, I've lost this arm. If I'm flow, I've got the block out here. Punch shield got the block out. Down spear got the block out. But this is the first motion. My opponent at this point, fearing the arm double tap, as 99% of Amtgarders will, is going to be pushing off of his lead leg to be getting his sword back as much as he can. Because he doesn't want to just get tapped in the forearm twice. That feels lame. Which means that as he's pulling back and he's pushing off of the lead leg, I can step through and hit that lead leg with like 99% accuracy, because he can't functionally move it if he's using that to push backwards to get his sword back, as almost everyone does. So at decent speed, it really just comes out to going here, and there's very, very little response that my opponent can do to get out of that. So this is one of those, the combo shot setup is my opponent has committed to a shot that I don't have to block with my sword, and me taking the sword arm means that I don't have to defend myself with the sword between shots. So, the how and the why get set up through that, and then the rest of it is all just a single chop and then a step through and a sweep at the leg. It's a shot that works consistently enough that one of my favorite parts about it is you don't actually have to be looking at your opponent to throw the shot anymore. And there are a few things more intimidating than getting ready to fight someone on a ditch and having them stare you down while killing the person they're currently fighting. But it's something that I have gotten an enormous amount of mileage out of, because the setup for it really is incredibly simple. All it is an opponent committing heavily to a shot in the upper left quadrant. And with a little bit of footwork, it is going to be an incredibly consistent thing. One of those, how the chess game of Amtgard moves is that people will generally stop committing heavily to shots on your upper left quadrant. Because once they get hit by that a couple times, they don't want to do that anymore. But yeah, so that is one that I absolutely get a lot of mileage out of. As Farix and I discussed before starting the video, depending on exactly how you want to define things, it's also relatively easy to define most fakes as some form of combo shot, because instead of fully committing to a shot and then throwing a second shot out of it entirely, I can fake one shot and, using my opponent's need to guard themselves, throw a shot out from there. Which is, I guess, another thing that we had skipped over before is there are ways of mechanically, just physiologically, preventing your opponent from throwing certain shots. So you can also prevent your opponent from attacking you, not by taking the sword arm, but if I throw over, it's going to be hard with the lights here, I'm going to duck down a little bit, but if I throw over this way and my opponent overreacts to that block, they can prevent their sword, or they can prevent themselves from being able to swing on me by simply covering their sword shoulder with their shield. Which means that if I were to come in and throw a shot up here and then go out this way, I can combo off of that because of the fact that my opponent can't swing through his own equipment that I have with my first motion put between himself and me, or put between him and myself. However that works grammatically speaking, we're not going to get too caught up in that, but we already have. So yeah, I mean these are all different ways of doing it. There's also probably the favorite of the Tal'Dorei fighter, the double leg, where if you can get your opponent kind of juked out and throw for one leg, a lot of times there's sort of a pause on exactly what they want to do, and whether they swing or start to drop. If you throw for that back leg, a lot of times you can get a really quick kill on someone just as they try to piece together how they want to respond to the first one. So if I were to come up, and you can chain multiple things out of this. So let's say I come in, I start to come low to sell my opponent that I'm going low, and then start to go up high. If he were to cover his sword shoulder with his shield, that means I no longer have to worry about that shot, which allows me to go here, based on the fact that I have sold him on the hip wrap, fooled him, which makes him overreact to the second motion that I do, which leaves the actual target that I'm going for open, and once you hit the first leg, a lot of times your opponent will go, oh shoot, I should, and then they're dead before they finish that thought. Now these things, of course, don't always work that way, and if I were to try to do that against someone who was halfway decent, I would really want a shield in my hands because odds are good that my opponent's going to throw back between all of that. But it is absolutely a valid and good tactic, particularly within tournament fighting, with shields to come up, start up high, and then bam bam, and just walk through that. A lot of times people don't particularly expect it. But if your opponent squares up, instead of having a lead leg and a trailing leg, you can get that shot with some degree of regularity. It's actually pretty comical. I know I've seen you land that because you're a fan. Did you have any, now that you're thinking through good combos you're wanting to demonstrate for the audience?
Going back to what you were saying about putting their gear in front of their own way so that they can't return to you, same applies to your gear. Like, you have a sword and a shield, and there are certain rules that we can follow, like there's no body to body, obviously. So there are certain positions you can put yourself in to kind of not take advantage of the rules, but put yourself in an advantageous position as far as the rules go. If we were in single, let's say, and I threw a shot that made Tim block real close to his body, and then I moved here, if he can swing if he wants to, but I'm very much going to get a double tap off before he can figure out how to throw two shots from that position. So I have all day to throw my two shots, and I will obviously take one by putting my arm in that position, but it's very hard to mentally recover from realizing you can't actually throw any shot you've probably thrown before, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Putting someone in a position where they don't have the muscle memory to throw the shot that they need to get out of that situation is absolutely fantastic. And I know that you do that a lot because you're really good at that.
Same thing with shields. Like, if his hand went behind his head for like a high cross, or pretend you have a shield real quick.
All right, you just got a shield.
Okay.
You don't have to pretend.
Well, you gotta put that on. Okay. So if his hand went up by his head for a high cross or something like that, I can put my shield right here where his hand is. There we go. Where his hand is, and it's very unlikely he's going to find a way around it because he's already committed to that high cross. In which case, he can obviously still block me with his shield, but he can't block his legs and his body. So you can go low, low, or if he does block the low one, you can, if he brings him down low, you can hit him up high, do it again. But basically, I'm just playing, what's the martial art where you push each other over?
Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Shoot. Whichever one that is.
Yeah, sticky hands or whatever you want to call it. But I am basically pushing forward so that we're basically countering each other's momentum here. And that's fine for me because I'm only committing a block to that and I still have my sword, whereas he's committing his sword to that and all he has is a block, which puts me in the position where I can hit him, but he can't hit me.
and you know, with all this coming down to combos, again, just not having to worry about needing to block with the sword.
Yeah.
If your opponent can't throw shots, you don't have to block with a sword.
However you achieve that goal, like that is the point, I guess.
Yeah.
Talk about talk about throwing your hips back.
Oh, the body dodges.
Yeah.
So this is going to come down to distance control. This is Ben bringing this up. Yes, this is a very common thing for me to do. I'm not sure how well we're going to be able to demonstrate it here. So we may have to do a little bit of like stick figure-y type action instead of doing something particularly organic. But if my opponent is fighting with me at a range that I've established, what I like to do, as people have seen in some of the other videos, is right here, if my opponent sticks his sword straight out, I am at that maximum range. Or if you go just point to point, I should be there, right? So what I like to do is I like to fight about an inch inside of that, so that it seems like it's this nice tempting target. My opponent should have a good enough understanding of distance control to recognize that I'm now in the kill zone, which means that if my opponent were to take a sweep at my hips, as we were talking about there, I can relatively easily scoot my hips back and just throw shots from there. So, you know, this takes a lot of different forms on the field. If people have seen me fight, they've almost certainly seen me throw combo shots off of this, because I like getting people to commit to shots that they now can no longer land, and whether it's dodging this way and throwing twice that way, whether it's dodging here and just aggressing that way, there's about a million good ways of doing things when you don't have to worry about defense anymore and you haven't moved yourself out of an offensive position. One of the great things about this is that if my opponent is swinging low and committing to that shot, me leaning back, I really am not demonstrably changing my distance to target for any of this. My shoulders are staying in functionally exactly the same spot. In fact, in some cases, I'm even leaning further over, which means that I can throw any shot I would want to, whether my opponent was guarding or not, out of that position. So double tapping here is fine. I can also go for just a straight torso shot because he's gone for something that is much more variable in range, my hips, than his shoulders are when he's committing to a shot like that. So yeah, absolutely a fantastic time to do it is just distance controlling. You know, the initial example was moving laterally away for distance, but oh yes, you can absolutely move just backwards away from your opponent and achieve that if you can get them to commit to a shot.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not even footwork at that point. It's more of just getting your body out of the way. Like, I mean, your feet are involved in that motion.
Oh, yeah.
But like, I can do the same thing, like with my torso. Like, if he swings, I can do that and come back up like this, or I can, just, John Wick, or the Matrix, my bad, out of the way. If it's a stab going for here, I could slap it out and get away with this. Or if I'm fairly confident he's going for this pocket anyway, I can just kind of dodge out of the way. Usually there's a step involved in that somewhere. But if they're fully committing to that and you just miss it, like you just take that step out of the way and they're fully committed, you have, like Tim was saying, you have full control over the situation because you haven't given up any of your offensive capabilities in order to not get hit.
Yeah, now I will say the asterisk to that is any sort of body dodge with the upper half of your body will have your shoulders moving. If I dodge the pocket dodge, throwing a double tap out of there is much more difficult for it. But a lot of times it's possible, especially if I'm going for here, you dodge that way. Yeah, you've got all sorts of opportunity to be able to throw whatever shots you want, and there will almost certainly be a spin miss.
Oh, yes.
If you're not killing pretty, why are you bothering? But yeah, which does kind of bring up combos are a lot of times just stylistically some of the prettiest stuff that I feel like I'm doing, because once you land that first shot, especially if it's on the sword arm, you can do just about anything for that follow-up shot. So it is not uncommon to land that first shot and then rotate through and go spinning out or spinning in and you know, spinning off in some direction or other. That you can do a lot of stuff because you have taken your opponent's offense out of the equation. So whatever you do from then on is fine because you can't lose as long as you throw fast enough and they don't have really, really fast switches. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I have to cover on it. Is there anything that you're thinking?
That's a good. I'm good with that.
Okay, yeah. So that's combos. Hopefully you have a decent understanding of how to physically throw a combo shot and when the appropriate time to do so is. You know, fiddle around with it, find out how it applies to you, because it's going to apply differently to everybody's fighting style. Some double taps are going to be a lot more natural for some people. Other people are going to have a very difficult time with that. And that's okay. Find what works for you, Warlord. And yeah, John, if you wanna kill, we should be good.
Good job, guys.